Hey, my mom was a rock concert promoter. About 31 years ago today, I was 7 years old, roughly, and I saw my first concert. It was Chuck Berry. Do you remember who Chuck Berry was? Just a couple of people. It's good. It's good. We're all dated a little bit. Having a mother as a rock concert promoter as a kid is pretty romantic, right? The idea is exciting. I get to, whenever I want, whenever a show comes in town, be the person that sits up in the front row, meet the artist, enjoy the experience, be backstage, be a runner. My experiences as a kid were pretty fantastic. But it ultimately didn't really work out well for our family. In fact, my mom's business did pretty well for a long time and then didn't do well. And didn't do well in a meteoric way. And she got out of that business. What was fascinating to me as I started to learn more about what was actually happening as I became older and more aware about what her business was recognizing that her business was really about predicting what was going to work. We were in a market. We were in Oregon. She had to find an artist that she thought was relevant to the audience. She had to find an event venue that she thought was the right size for the audience that she believed was there. And she had to get an artist whom she thought was interesting enough and was cost-effective enough to be able to find that audience and bring them into that event. It's a lot of predictions to make in a small town in Oregon for a person whom my mother was a wonderful person but didn't go to college. So when I saw her business start to implode, she's doing very well today, by the way, but when I saw that business start to implode, it made me think quite a bit about what are all the different elements that you have to be aware of to be able to control so that you can be successful professionally, personally, and so have you. So when I left and I went to school, I found myself in a space studying academically behavioral psychology. What's behavioral psychology? It's the desire to identify a series of variables with mathematical significance against each one of those variables and predict what an outcome may be for a group of people. Now, I'm in marketing now. I'm the CMO of a company called Mindjet. So what's the relevancy there? When I first began my career, I found my way from Yahoo to Microsoft to WebTrends, as Brian said earlier, to Oracle via Involver, and now to Mindjet. What's the relevance to prediction and the relevance to behavioral psychology and the relevance to being able to understand how certain segments of people or interactions actually drive successful outcomes? It's striking, but it didn't really make sense to me at that time. I'd love to be able to look back and tell you a perfect story, and I probably could, but it was kind of a bunch of guesses and enjoying the serendipity of the experience for myself. So I find myself today in a pretty exciting position. I think that all of us are in a pretty exciting position in that we now have the ability to take what we understand, the explicit information that's available to us in our businesses, and begin to find the relationship to all that implicit data that's available to be able to start to predict more successful outcomes. And that's a pretty exciting spot for all of us. It's a pretty powerful spot for all of us, and it's companies like Lattice, who I'm really excited to be here and be able to talk about our story with, that are helping companies like ours, and many of you that are in here have the ability to do that as well, start to apply some of this amazing math that's available. So I'm going to spend probably 10, maybe 15 minutes with you, and I'm going to tell you the story of Mindjet. There are a handful of folks that are here, some alumni and some current people that are on the Mindjet team, so enjoy the story that I'm sure you've heard a couple of times already. So who is Mindjet? Let me give you some context. So Mindjet started as a company about 10 years ago. As a company, we built a product that many of you may have used at some point in time. Some of you may use today. It's called Mind Manager. Probably the most popular mind mapping, personal productivity brainstorming application in the world. We have millions of customers that have been using it. As a company, our objective has been to not just make that product better, but to extend the idea of individual productivity out to the team, to really help team collaborate better, purposeful collaboration. As a business, we've been looking to continue to grow, and we saw a very logical extension in our business into the idea of information and even idea management. So about a month ago, and Brian mentioned this as well, we acquired a company called Spigot. Some of you may know about Spigot. This is really the position that we're in as a company right now. This is the fun that I get to have and our team gets to have in marketing. We now have, as a suite of products, one of the most comprehensive and interesting idea management platforms in the world, coupled with one of the more powerful individual productivity tools. Two very different go-to-markets, two very different products. But we've got some pretty interesting scale to play with. Having been around for a number of years and having been fairly successful, especially in the last few years, we're pretty large now for a mid-sized business, 400 people almost globally, a very big footprint, very big operations in Europe. And it leads us to where we are today. Some of you may see the picture of us and a little story that you've been sitting on. Hopefully not still sitting on. It tells the story that I'm going to tell you now, but I'll give you a little bit more flavor around it. We have something in our business that we half-jokingly call the curse of abundance. How many of you are in marketing, specifically in marketing, and work directly with your sales team? Most of you. About half, a little bit over half. So have any of you ever heard from your sales team, you don't give me enough leads, enough qualified leads? We all have. So in a scenario like ours, let me put some context around it. We deliver per salesperson across our organization. We've got about 75 people in sales around the globe, about 140 in sales marketing around the globe. We deliver to each salesperson in every region around the globe at least 20 new opportunities a day. At least. Seems like a pretty big number. You'd assume that anybody in any of your sales organizations would be very, very happy with 20 new opportunities every single day. We really have the same result as a business. We've had the same result as a business. We don't get enough qualified opportunities to our sales team. What's that really end up looking like? It ends up looking like our sales team not being able to prioritize where they spend their time. We think about lead scoring. We'll tell you a little bit about what we do as an organization. We're not unsophisticated by any stretch. We've got a very large investment in technology. But the same problem exists for us that probably exists for many of you, which is how do I spend my time as a salesperson so that I can be most effective, so that I can close the most business, so that I can hit my quota and help our company be successful. We have too many opportunities for our sales team to actually cover. Seems like a good problem to have, but it's a pretty big problem. Some context, I obfuscated these numbers a little bit, but they're pretty much generally accurate. This is what our business looks like overall. Million plus people that spend time on mindjet.com and all of our digital assets each quarter. It's a good number of people, especially for a B2B/B2C business. Now, we send a lot of opportunities to our sales organization. That marketing qualified lead that goes directly to the salesperson before it becomes an SQL. It's a big number. 50,000, 60,000, 70,000. These numbers kind of move up and down depending upon our demand gen programs. Our conversion rate stays relatively consistent. We use a lot of testing and optimization on the front end to try and get more people through the funnel. But the real punchline here is that our business could be a heck of a lot more efficient. Of the 65,000 opportunities, only 4.5% have been converting into SQLs. And that's actually the average, right? So there's obviously some variances that exist there. Maybe a good problem to have. Still a really significant problem. I mentioned that I think that we're a moderately sophisticated organization. Maybe we're a pretty sophisticated organization. We've built out a fairly comprehensive technology stack. But to give you a sense of the type of data that we deal with. So lead scoring has been something that we've been working on, continually trying to improve. But the amount of data that we deal with is kind of complicated. Thousands of records are changing every hour. Thousands of records, all the different attributes. We've got multiple different steps in our evaluation process. We have nearly 20 different nurture programs that run in different languages, in different regions, in different time zones, based on different interactivity that takes place on the website. And we do this all sitting inside of Eloqua, along with a series of other tools that we use that we manage entirely in the marketing organization. So you'd think that with an investment in all of these tools and technologies that we'd be able to solve that problem really simply. The answer is that we couldn't. The time that we had, the technology that we had, didn't provide us with the ability to use math in a way that actually gave us qualified opportunities to our sales team in a way that let them use their time effectively. So how do we think about this? What have we been doing in the last few months in particular? Well, I already mentioned this before. We have thousands of inbound opportunities, thousands of records changing on an hourly basis. All this data was explicit. This is what we were asking for. In fact, we would get so onerous in the forms to try and reduce the number of opportunities to come in that we would ask for 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different pieces of data in order to get to a point where we'd even consider sending it to the sales team. This explicit data for us, even though we were adding more and more and more on top of it, got us to this range on average, 4.5% conversion to SQL. Nothing to be excited about. So our question was pretty logical. What else do we have available to us? We know we have the technology, we know we have the team, we know we have the people. Are the processes that we're missing, or are there really other technologies? In fact, what we found is that there's a hypothesis that we started working with. This hypothesis was, can we find additional data that would give us the ability to better indicate whether or not one of those opportunities coming in was actually going to be likely to close? What would that data look like? The first thing you start to do is look at all of the different technologies that are out there that let you pull data in from other sources, data.com, you name it, there's a myriad of them that are out there. And the reality is that that implicit data is interesting, and we thought it would be useful, but we couldn't find mathematical significance in making it an investment that we thought would move the number. So what do we really think our answer was? We believed that using predictive analytics and predictive lead scoring in particular would actually be our solution. Punchline of the story, some of you may have seen or read, is in fact that this is proven to be true, but let me walk you through a little bit more information here. This was a fascinating process for me. The Lattice team worked with us very closely to actually roll out a model, to build a model first and to roll it out. And I didn't really understand all the semantics of what a model would look like as it's rolled out. So let me tell you all here, in the case that you choose this to be a path to go down. So we've got several years of back data in our company, our instances of Salesforce, NetSuite, Oracle, et cetera. We were able to, with the Lattice team, take a look back over 80% of our data in our back history, build a model out, pulling in all the implicit data sources, and I'll talk to you about some of them in a second, and then use that model, to prove that model to be true, at least what we believe to be true, by running it against the data that exists in our system, that last 20%. It's an interesting process, and it's something that you have to think about because the volume of data that you deal with can affect the significance of the impact of the model. The initial models that we ran, I think Matt's here, so he can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe when we looked at this data, we thought that we could see potentially a 3% lift in our convert rates in some cases. 3%, 4 to 7%, that neighborhood. So what did we do? We sat down with the team, and along with the Lattice team, identified over 300 different variables that we could bring in that were implicit data sources, along with all the data that we had inside of Mindjet's databases. We looked explicitly for a couple things that were important. Brian mentioned this, Abner mentioned this, predictive indicators, both negative and positive, that would give us the belief that we could potentially close an opportunity better. And then we ran a test run with this model. What was pretty fascinating for us is that when we ran this model, the first result for me that was interesting as the head of marketing wasn't how effective the model was or had the potential to be. It was actually the learnings that we started to get from that data. There's hubris in marketing. And I think if anybody here tells you that that's not correct, you're probably not telling yourself the truth. There's hubris in marketing, and we have to be confident and proud of what we do. We have to believe that we understand how our product fits in the market, how we position it, what we should be doing with our sales team in order for them to sell to it. Sometimes that information that we have in our heads isn't the whole truth. And what was most interesting for us as we ran the first model is that we started to get back some indicators of what actually was taking place in our customers that were closing, and also our customers that were not closing. So here's some interesting things. This is actually our data. This is somewhat fascinating data. A couple things that were pretty shocking to us. The first is that we had intuitively known that if large companies were trying to buy our product Mind Manager, that they wouldn't be able to do it because the firewalls of these large companies wouldn't allow them to download the product. We know that's especially true in Europe. But we never really thought about this as it related to the qualification process. If somebody trialed a product and we got a hold of them, we never thought to ask them, do you work for a large company that has a big firewall? So it's fascinating when you start to look at this data and how the data proves true in your business. And what its implications are, not just to the way that you run the sales marketing processes, but actually how it can impact your messaging. Let me tell you something equally interesting on the positive indicator side. As a company, while we had focused on individual productivity and built a desktop product, we'd always believed that collaboration was our future. And in fact, that's been our core positioning over the last couple of years, a product that focuses on purpose-based collaboration. It would seem fairly logical to all of you here if I were to say, if you're going to buy collaboration software, you're probably going to have more than one office, right? Seems super logical. Well, our position, the way that we were focusing on our value proposition and even our qualification scripts for our sales organization, focused on our product values, what the pains were that you had. We didn't even think to pause and say, as a qualification question, do you have more than one office? In fact, what we've been able to do since we found this information is begin to introduce this information back to our sales team so that during the qualification process, they can take some of these positive indicators and actually ask those questions, those qualifications. Do you have an office in more than one location? Super, super, super logical. It all makes sense when you see the data together, but it's very easy to get locked up in the way that you work. Math can apply itself in a lot of different ways. Let me tell you a little bit about the results. Exciting and impressive for us. Several thousand opportunities coming through on a weekly basis. Not enough time for our sales organization to get through. With this model, when predictive lead scoring, we built out a quintile system. Our top 2 quintiles are performing at 2 and 3 and 4 times greater performance than any other quintile for us. What's the first thing we can do as a marketing team? Not focus on demand generation as much as we are, and start to focus on internal operations. How do we help the sales team only focus on those top 2 quintiles, and how do we make sure that they have all the right tools from a sales perspective to be able to close these deals faster and move on? 4x improvement is a monster number, especially when you're dealing with thousands and thousands and thousands of opportunities. We really couldn't be happier. This is the very early stages for us. So when I look out to the future for us, we started initially to roll out all of our predictive lead scoring in the Americas. Specifically, we're rolling out internationally. We have dynamic scoring as one of our key priorities, so not just looking at the initial update as we get all the implicit data and explicit data together, but additional activity, maybe them using a product, maybe them re-downloading applications, maybe them sharing stuff. But where it's really exciting, where this math and what we're doing with Lattice, I think is going to open up the future for us. Brian mentioned, I mentioned before, we just acquired a company. Imagine operationally what happens, as many of you have probably been through. We actually have two separate instances of Salesforce, two separate instances of different marketing automation tools, and in fact, two very distinct and different go-to-markets. One of the things that we're working on right now is actually tying together those two instances, the historical records that we have about what actually works, and using this data and a predictive model to actually develop our more comprehensive cross-selling plan. So the opportunities are actually pretty enormous here. And we're really, really, really excited about what we're seeing from a results perspective right now. And with that, I'm going to end. And I think we have a little bit of time for questions. Is that right?
Thanks, Abner. I just want to wrap up with a couple of final thoughts, and then if we have time for a couple of questions. First one, just some concluding remarks, is that the era of big data is here, and lots of companies are now embracing predictive analytics. And so it's kind of feels to me like marketing automation was about 5 or 6 years ago. Early adapters are in, so it's not just Juniper and Mindjet, but I see Kronos is here that uses predictive analytics. Banks are using it now. We have 3 of the top 10 banks in the US, Citizens and Bank of America and SunTrust, and lots of technology companies. Second is that there's more information to discover and it's available. So it's not hiding. You can get this information pretty easily and build a model to not just guess which attributes, but actually to know which attributes. Instead of just having anecdotal evidence or hypotheses, you can actually prove it with data science. Organizations are embracing it of all sizes. We're seeing, just like in marketing automation, the early adapters are technology companies in general, but a lot of other sectors as well. And we think that marketing can do a lot more. What we're seeing with a lot of our customers and a lot of marketers doing lead scoring is sort of hit a plateau. You do lead scoring and you have good performance, it goes up, you're scoring from passing everything, and you sort of hit a plateau of conversion rates. This is a way to really have great improvements in your performance by improving your conversion rates. And lastly, a good way to start a conversation is to think about your triggers. So if you could know something that you believe is predictive, what would that information be? And in most cases, it's discoverable, whether it's someone signing a real estate lease, or it's, that great question that you guys ask now, do you have another office? Something so simple to see the distribution of employees. Nobody's going to need to collaborate if everybody can walk down the hall. So it's a very simple sort of attribute, and you can find that out. So I want to thank all of you. I certainly want to thank Abner and Yasha for a great presentation. We are out of time. What I will say is Yasha and Abner are going to be here with myself. So if anybody has any questions, want to talk to us, feel free to come up. And I want to thank you very much for your time and interest. Thank you.